The effect of COVID-19 continues to seriously impact our modalities of work. We continue to seek alternatives to ensure sustained progress on critical matters of international security. I am therefore grateful for this opportunity to contribute to the Geneva Peace Week and to highlight the importance of weapons and ammunition management to peace, security, and stability, in particular in the context of security sector reform, or what is known as SSR. The United Nations Secretary General has acknowledged the criticality of weapons and ammunition management to saving lives, particularly in fragile and conflict-affected settings. In his agenda for disarmament, securing our common future, the Secretary General acknowledges that the loss of arms and ammunition from storage sites and their onward proliferation can be a catalyst for armed violence, conflict, and insecurity. The United Nations continues to develop practical gender mainstream guidance on weapons and ammunition management in support of member states and other relevant stakeholders. Just last month, a new model on small arms and light weapons control in the context of SSR was published as part of the United Nations Modular Small Arms Control Implementation Compendium, known as MOSAIC. The illegal proliferation and unlawful use of weapons and ammunition pose pressing security challenges in many states. It is very important that the linkages between SSR and weapons and ammunition controls are clearly identified and strengthened at all levels, including through the development of national security policies, strategies, plans, and legislation, the facilitation of national dialogues on SSR, the development of national management and oversight capacities, and the conduct of security sector reviews. Also critical to note is that effective SSR and weapons and ammunition management cannot be achieved without gender equality. And for this reason, mainstreaming gender equality within the security sector is essential. Against this backdrop, I welcome the focused discussions on the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which highlights the intimate relationship between SSR and weapons and ammunition management. I am pleased to note that from 2018 to 2019, my office provided financial and technical assistance to Bosnia and Herzegovina in the area of stockpile management through UNSCAR Trust Fund. Bosnia and Herzegovina is often taken as a success story for international cooperation and coordination and provide many lessons learned, likely applicable in other contexts. On behalf of the Office for Disarmament Affairs, I wish to thank our partners at the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining and the Ammunition Management Advisory Team for this opportunity. Thank you.
Dear viewers, 10 months into 2020, we are starting to see the long-term effects of the COVID-19 crisis. The pandemic is impacting our societies and economies severely. It is also changing the way we work and interact. It is in the spirit of the day that the GICHD has developed this digital contribution to the 2020 edition of the Geneva Peace Week. The video you're about to see was made in partnership with UNODA and in collaboration with our international and national colleagues in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Peacebuilding in the COVID-19 era necessitates an understanding of what has worked in the past. Bosnia and Herzegovina has a lot to offer in that respect. As you will hear from the distinguished speakers in this video, peacebuilding works best when it is framed under the umbrella of national ownership and supported by strong collaborative relationships among international and national stakeholders. Also, peacebuilding efforts are most effective when risks to communities are addressed through the development and implementation of a clearly defined plan. In 2012, a review of the Dayton Peace Agreement determined the residual military tasks to be completed by the European Union force, Operation Althea, in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The review identified the issues of surplus ammunition, weapons and explosives as a priority, not least due to the significant safety and security risks stemming from them. Thus, the review paved the way for the development of the so-called Ammunition, Weapons and Explosive Master Plan. As you will learn from this video, the master plan involved a phased, 8-pillar approach for the transparent disposal of surplus stockpiles and the implementation of a sustainable life cycle management of arms and ammunition. And I'm happy to say that as of October 2020, the time when this video was produced, the main goals of the master plan have been largely achieved. This represents a remarkable success. To be noted that the master plan also had broader peacebuilding relevance impacts. It allowed for the removal of tools of war through the disposal of aging and surplus material. Also, it supported and reinforced broader confidence building and security sector reform efforts by improving the effectiveness and accountability of the armed forces of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Please allow me a few words about the GICHD. The Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, GICHD, works towards reducing risks to communities stemming from explosive ordnance. The center helps develop and professionalize the field of disarmament, specifically mine action and ammunition management, by combining 3 distinct lines of service: upstream field support focused on capacity development and advice, multilateral work focused on norms and standards, and research and development focused on cutting-edge solutions to current and emerging challenges. The international community has placed increased attention on the risks stemming from poorly managed arms and ammunition stockpiles. Guidelines such as the AETGs and Mosaic provide a solid framework for stakeholders to respond to these risks. The GICHD has more than 20 years of experience in the field of explosive risk reduction, with an initial focus on mine action and more recently on ammunition management. Indeed, the center has expanded its scope of work in recent years and now also provides support to states in managing their ammunition according to good practice. The GICHD partnered with UNODA and its Safeguard program to that effect and established the Ammunition Management Advisory Team, AMAT. It goes without saying that AMAT will provide technical support to our international and national partners in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
The Ammunition Management Advisory Team, or AMAT, is an urgent response for the practical, authoritative and sustainable support to states for ammunition management, with the aim of increasing their safety, security and sustainability. AMAT's primary focus is the technical and operational level of ammunition management, but as we've seen from our speakers before, the technical aspect can be used as an entry point for supporting broader political and strategic efforts, especially when it comes to security sector reform. In the case of Bosnia, life cycle management of ammunition in particular fostered the efficiency and accountability of the Bosnian armed forces, which ultimately supported broader SSR efforts and disarmament efforts in the country. Hello, we're talking today to Mihaela Osorio, Deputy Chief of Mission at the Romanian Embassy in Belgrade, the Republic of Serbia. Hello, Mihaela, how are you?
Good morning, Jovana. So good to see you after all of this time. It's a real pleasure to talk to you.
You'll be speaking to us as in your former capacity as the political military advisor, both to the commander of the European Force Operation Althea and to the head of the EU mission in Bosnia between 2011 and 2015, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I was the embodiment of comprehensive approach. So that was the buzzword of the day and of that phase of SSR in Bosnia, indeed.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the history of security sector reform? What were some of the main elements or some of the main tenets or pillars of the reform process when it comes to security sector?
Well, yeah, the year 2000 was actually a good threshold because this is when one gets into the so-called an intermediate phase of state building in Bosnia, and this is when the international supervisory institutions are still, let's say, trying to drive institutional reform and actually creating the scaffolding for the country to function. And this, in the middle 2000, this is when some of the issues that have not been done in the previous phases also became very much an issue of concern. So when it comes to building trust in the country, there was basically a limit that could be reached. And one of the biggest problems was that the military formation, the armies, let's say, of the three former warring parties were still present.
Right.
While you hold on to this, it's very difficult to move forward and to build trust. So the High Representative at that time felt that something needed to be done, and the defense reform was put in place. This was let's say, a process conceptualized by the international community and driven by the international community. The idea was to bring all three former warring parties and their armies within one institution at the state level. And this was more or less, if you think about it, a confidence-building measure.
In terms of the defense review, how did that proceed?
It was let's say, a balancing act that went as far as it could go. They did agree to create the armed forces of BIH, but they couldn't let go. For example, in the structures of the army, there were let's say, the regimental system. Somehow the concept got into the mix, and then you had, a very, very important reminder of how the armies looked like before defense reform. When it came to, let's say, the ammunition and weapons storage sites, you see, Bosnia was the theater of heavy fighting, and the country was scattered with storage sites, which were, surprise, surprise, evenly distributed among the two entities. And these were kept in somewhat good condition compared to other military facilities. And the question is why? Why is it that nobody could let go of this? So you see, that was the challenge. You reached a level where the reform could go no more, and then it became somehow toxic.
From what I recall, one of the main aspects was the review process that the commander of EUFOR at the time put in place in order to identify entry points for strengthening the commitment not only of the international community, but also facilitating national ownership.
Well, yes, that was in a way a natural thing to do. And the operation commander ordered a review of the old and uncompleted Dayton tasks. The military tasks that EUFOR had to do. There was the military review, and the military planners came with this enormously long list of things that still need to be done.
Yeah.
And then there was, let's say, the review of the review, which I was entrusted to do. And then from all of those tasks, we looked at what does really matter. What does matter in the future for this country, and what matters actually in the bigger picture of security sector reform and actually of state building in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it came as no surprise to anyone that the conclusion was very, very crystal clear at the time. And that is that the enormous quantity of ammunition and weapons that were still lying in the many storage sites around the country was a threat. It was a threat to the safe and secure environment. It was a threat to human security. And it was a threat to the armed forces of BIH, who was this young institution that inherited lots of problems from the previous armies, had no, let's say, not only no mandate, it felt it had no mandate, it had no knowledge of how to bring all of these things together. So obviously, ammunition and weapons disposal, this is how we called it at the time, the surplus of ammunition and weapons disposal, was the key data and residual task that needed to be completed.
And tell us more a little bit about the non-paper.
Well, the non-paper was a document based on a pedagogical approach. So, you know, whoever reads it was, let's say, meant to understand what's the issue, why we are in a deadlock, who are we, and how are we going to go forward. There was no question that the issue needed to be dealt with, and the ammunition and weapons surplus in Bosnia needed to be disposed of. You know, the reasons were crystal clear, and we talked a little bit about them. Let's say, the catchy part of the non-paper was in a way, the introduction. Mm-hmm. I said, why is it that we have so much input into this issue over the years and so little output? Where is it broken? Why isn't this working right? How can we streamline this? And then, you know, you take the reader over its couple of pages, 5 or 6. I have it here in front of me. I'm so happy I kept the copy. And then the conclusion is very, very clear. It's because this process needs to be done on behalf and for and with your national partner. So the key to getting this thing done is actually to foster real local ownership. Very few people actually understood that, you know, once you have the policy on the paper, on the table, well, this is when you actually just begin. Before the beginning of the story. So we had the policy, now it was time to get to the plans. And this is when, you know, it was very interesting. So the international partners, they all put forward their best planners, and they locked themselves up in a room in Camp Butmir, and they spent a couple of weeks there producing plans. And there were a number of versions of what they called campaign plans. And whose campaign? So actually it was lots of military planning and, you know, lots of frustration, brainstorming. And somebody who will be speaking on this panel later on actually coined this phrase. You know, this is so difficult because we are repairing an airplane while flying it. Yeah. And this is, you know, when the first, let's say, glimmer of understanding trickled in. You know, we, the international partners, this is not our job. We have to bring in our national partners. Yeah. We need to bring here the armed forces of BIH and ask them, how do they see this thing being done? What kind of process do they see in place? So the national partners were invited. And soon after that, the campaign plan turned into the master plan.
Mihaela, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today. Thank you also for your commitment to improving the safety and security of Bosnia and Herzegovina. As a Bosnian, I take the opportunity to say thank you, and we will see you soon. Thank you very much. Hello, we are now speaking to Colonel Martin Traxler, the Special Advisor for Weapons and Ammunition Disposal to the Commander of EUFOR, and the Senior Program Manager for the Physical Security and Stockpile Management Mobile Training Team for EUFOR Operation Althea. Martin, hello, how are you?
Hello, Joanna, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for joining us and supporting this Geneva Peace Week event.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, thank you.
So your role as the SABAD is as one of the main coordinators of the Ammunition, Weapons and Explosive Master Plan, providing support not only to EUFOR but also to the Ministry of Defense, to General Mašović himself.
Yes, my duty, if you want to say so, is not only to support the MOD and the armed forces, but also coordinate all activities on the international side supporting this master plan. That's correct, yes.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about the actual development and eventual and subsequent implementation of the master plan?
Yes, I mean, the basic was laid out in 2010 when we actually started with a very detailed situation analysis. And then the second part was more or less developing this non-paper Michaela just mentioned, which laid out the basics on the strategic level. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning of 2013, we actually started together with all the main implementers and the main partners on the international side. We started to lay out the master plan with the following structure. We had basic decisions, they were made. For example, it was very clear we are supporting the Bosnian authorities, so it was clear that it was local ownership, which was one of the keys. The second part was also very important, that we said we have to deal with these issues in a holistic approach. And the third was we defined a clear end state, which was very, very important for us when we developed the master plan in details. And last but not least, we had to set up a structure which covers the strategic level, the operational level, and the tactical level as well. Then, after that, we started to define certain positions, such as the position I hold in since then, but also the support part from the armed forces to make sure that we have a so-called single point of contact for in cases we need some information from the local authorities. So we had one single point of contact, which we were allowed to contact and receive all necessary information and data. For me personally, the most important thing within the master plan was we laid out and made very clear which implementer is responsible for which operational part.
But in terms of the actual issue areas that the master plan itself is tackling, there are, I believe, about 8 pillars, if you will, that the plan itself covers. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about that? To
define the most important part, and that was we had to make sure that the current stockpile on ammunition is being reduced. So that was priority number 1. Dealing with ammunition, because that was the most dangerous part. And then we set up a phase 2, dealing with small arms and light weapons. And third phase is then dealing with heavy weapons and obsolete vehicles. So we call it the life cycle now. It starts with disposal, and then the 100% inventory. We call it in the ammunition the visual inspection as well. And then it's capacity building and training as one operational line. It's maintenance of ammunition. It's ammunition surveillance. It's also SOPs and regulations. It's safety and it's security. These are the main lines of operations.
There is a clear example from Bosnia and Herzegovina that we need to help, in order to facilitate national ownership, build up capacity of the Ministry of Defense and the armed forces to be actually able to do the work on the ground at the tactical level. Now, as the senior project manager for the mobile training team for physical security and stockpile management, this is exactly what you guys are trying to do, correct? You're trying to build up the capacity of the armed forces to be effective in order to ensure safety and security of their ammunition and weapon stockpiles. Could you tell us a little bit more about that specific mobile training team project, please?
The key word here is sustainability. First of all, we work very close with the armed forces, of course. Based on their needs, we actually then start to lay out the different trainings. They are really based on their needs and not based on our knowledge. Yeah, this is a key. We don't want to implement something which they don't really need. So the training is need-based, first of all. Second, sometimes we have the word saying train and equip. If you just provide training, but you are not capable and willing to support them with material they need, you will not achieve the sustainability part. So every time when we got closer into the analysis of the courses, we then also did a very detailed analysis on the material they already have or they may need. And then it was one of my tasks to make sure that the material they need for a long-term sustainable training, that we can donate this material, or if it's possible that they even were able to provide the material on time. And then we could train with their equipment or with the equipment we donated directly on the spot. Perfect example actually is the laboratory. As you know, one of the most important parts in ammunition life cycle management is that you know exactly in which condition your stockpile is. So therefore, we worked very close together with experts from Austria and Switzerland in that case, which came up with a laboratory which was state of the art, but not, let's say, not really high tech, because maintenance of the laboratory is an issue as well. So when we had the setup on this laboratory, we were able then, with support of OSCE in this case, first to develop the laboratory, means make sure that the infrastructure was ready. And then we donated the equipment from the laboratory. And after that, we provided the training together with the experts from Austria and Switzerland. That was a perfect example, working hand in hand and providing need-based training.
Martin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today and to participate in this Geneva Peace Week video. We look forward to working with you as AMAT and GICHD in Bosnia and Herzegovina soon. And thank you all for watching this segment. We are going to move now to the interview and statement with General Maršović.
Glavni cilj oružanih snaga prije svega bio je kvantitativno i kvalitativno utvrđivanje stanja naoružanja, municije, minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava metodom 100% inspekcija i ubrzano rješavanje svih proglašenih viškova istog, a koji su predstavljali veliku opasnost po komandu jedinice oružanih snaga Bosne i Hercegovine, te civilno okruženje u blizini vojnih lokacija skladištenja, što je zahtijevalo poseban planski i ubrzan pristup, stoga je izgrađen glavni plan rješavanja viškova. Drugi cilj je bio unapređenje fizičke i tehničke zaštite naoružanja, municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava, koji je inače u završnoj fazi realizacije, to je da se pored rednog fizičkog obezbeđenja i infrastrukturalnom adaptacijom objekata, skladišta i ugradnjom adekvatnog sistema video nadzora na strateškim lokacijama skladišta smanji rizik od neovlaštenog pristupa i neželjenih sigurnosnih izazova i posljedica. Konačan cilj je riješiti sve viškove nestabilne municije minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava, a preostale količine municije oružanih snaga Bosne i Hercegovine uskladištiti na 5 lokacija, a naoružanje u rezervi u 2 strateška skladišta. Naš u stvari konačni krajnji cilj je da se postavi potpuno i kvalitetno upravljanje životnim vijekom naoružanja, municije minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava, a što u stvari podrazumijeva punu kontrolu nad svim aspektima operacije upravljanja, čuvanja i održavanja naoružanja, municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava. Dostizanja navedenih ciljeva izdvojio bi sljedeće realizovane aktivnosti. Koristeći kapacitete oružanih snaga Bosne i Hercegovine i uz pomoć partnera međunarodne zajednice od formiranja oružanih snaga Bosne i Hercegovine pa do 30.9.2020. godine riješeno je 22.360 tona municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava. Pored toga donirano je još 1.265 tona, a preostali dio municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava riješen je u skladu sa ugovorima bivših entitetskih ministarstava kroz proces prodaje temeljem ugovora bivših entitetskih ministarstava, ali i kroz utrošak municije za obuku oružanih snaga Bosne i Hercegovine. Ono što u konačnici mogu reći da je ukupno kroz sve ovo riješeno 26.306 tona municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava. Kada je u pitanju rješavanje viškova naoružanja, početno stanje viškova naoružanja je iznosilo 102.000 tona različitih vrsta oružja. U proteklom periodu izvršeno ukupno smanjenje, odnosno riješeno je oko 60% viškova naoružanja, a preostalo za rješavanje oko 42.000 komada viškova raznih vrsta naoružanja. U cilju podizanja stepena sigurnosti i sprečavanja zloupotreba s naoružanjem u novembru 2018. godine, oružane snage Bosne su uz pomoć i saradnju sa The Hello Trustom i EUFOR-om započele proces obilježavanja malog i lakog naoružanja, odnosno salva. Za obilježavanje planirano 61.705 komada naoružanja, a do kraja septembra obilježeno je 55.944 komada. U završnoj fazi implementacija projekta infrastrukturne adaptacije objekata na skladištima strateških rezervi naoružanja, municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava realizovan uz pomoć međunarodnih partnera u sklopu projekata SECAP, SEPAP i EXPOUD, te izgradnjom i osnivanjem laboratorije za hemijsku stabilnost baruta u Tromu Doboj, kao i nabavkom protupožarne opreme, instaliranjem sistema video nadzora na 4 lokacije, čime je ostvaren ogroman napredak u ostvarivanju zacrtanog cilja. Upravljanje životnim vijekom naoružanja, municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava zahtijeva adekvatnu organizacijsko-formacijsku strukturu te spreman stručan personal. Na ovom polju smo uradili značajne iskorake. U dokumentu pod nazivom Pregled odbrane Bosne i Hercegovine predviđene su organizacijsko-formacijske promjene u komandama i jedinicama koje su prilagođene uspješnom upravljanju životnim vijekom naoružanja, municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava. Uz pomoć međunarodnih partnera kontinuirano se organizuje i sprovode različiti vidovi obuke personala koji su angažovani na operacijama sa naoružanjem, municijom i minsko-eksplozivnim sredstvima, i to kroz više različitih kurseva koje organizuju oružane snage, a koje se odnose prvenstveno na obuku rukovodca, manipulanata, obuku transporta municije, odnosno ADR kursevi, ispitivanje hemijske stabilnosti baruta, obuku personala za održavanje municije i vizualni nadzor nad municijom, odnosno KTP, i drugo. Naprijed navedene kurseve je do sada pohađalo preko 1000 pripadnika oružanih snaga Bosne i Hercegovine. Dvije ključne stvari koje bih izdvojio iz iskustva oružanih snaga Bosne i Hercegovine, a koje bih želio podijeliti sa zemljama koje žele poboljšati svoje politike i prakse u procesu upravljanja životnim vijekom naoružanja, municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava. Prije svega, istakao bih činjenicu da nismo čekali da se ostvare svi neophodni uslovi za rješavanje ovog izazova, nego smo započeli proces, pripremali kapacitete te otpočeli s aktivnostima rješavanja viškova, uz konstantno podizanje iz godine u godinu kapaciteta, ali i uslova za prevazilaženje ovog problema. Naravno, uz stalno potenciranje na sigurnost ljudi i materijalnih sredstava prilikom realizacije svakog pojedinačnog zadatka, provođenje operacija sa municijom i minsko-eksplozivnim sredstvima, podrazumijevajući i stalnu brigu o zaštiti okoline. Ovome je naročito doprinijela otvorenost međunarodnih partnera koji su nam nesebično pomagali da dođemo do stanja kakvog sada imamo. Bitna pretpostavka za prevazilaženje izazova i stalnih rizika je da cjelokupan proces bude potpuno transparentan i uz punu kooperativnost međunarodnih partnera i zahvaljujući tome, ali i spremnosti za ubrzano rješavanje viškova naoružanja, municije i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava, postigli smo gore navedene značajne rezultate. Također bih želio istaknuti da je veoma važna priprema i obučenost personala na svim nivoima komandovanja i kontrole, a što je uz adekvatne procedure i alate za praćenje i izvještavanje o stanju omogućilo gore navedene rezultate usmjerene prema konačnom cilju potpunog upravljanja cijelim životnim ciklusom naoružanja i municije. Također je značajno naglasiti da su sve gore pomenute aktivnosti tekle ubrzanim tempom, ali pomenute mjere koje su poduzete na obuci personala, unapređenju infrastrukture, poboljšanju uslova čuvanja i transporta municije doprinijele su da aktivnosti se odvijaju neometano i, napominjem, bez najmanjeg incidenta, na što smo posebno ponosni.
Dear viewers, we have come to the end of this event. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. Our speakers offer key lessons learned from the peacebuilding process in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the linkages between security sector reform and arms and ammunition management. They have highlighted the importance of national ownership for a successful and thus comprehensive stockpile management, but also the role the latter can play in strengthening national ownership. The need for coordination and for long-term commitment of international partners has also been stressed. Finally, they have shown us that stockpile management efforts can support broader, more political security sector reform and peacebuilding efforts. We are convinced that the experience in Bosnia and Herzegovina is worth looking at with a view best to supporting peacebuilding efforts in other countries. I would like to thank Mr. Ebo, Dr. Osorio, General Mazovic and Colonel Traxler for their participation in this digital product. I would also like to thank the Geneva Peace Week for the opportunity to share our experiences and lessons learned from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you for watching.